So to be healthy, you have to take responsibility for yourself. Now, once you're healthy, then you have a different mission. And that different mission is usually taking responsibility for the world around you.
Nick Moss, mate, thank you so much for coming on the podcast again. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. You are, people ask me about you and they say, so what does Nick do? And I say, well, he's a functional neurologist. He does a bit of therapy. He does kinesiology. When I've spent time with him, we end up talking about emotional stuff, but he's also like so into the strength and the body and how it moves and all these kind of technical physicalities of the human body as well. And I just like, and you write courses, you just do so much, right? And so for me, it's a real treat to have you on and to hopefully share just a small percentage of what you have in your brain. So thank you so much.
Thanks, mate. It's always a pleasure to be here with you and spend some time with you. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, cool. We were just talking off air about the current state of the world, and when we're recording this, where Australia is in lockdown in various states and vaccinations happening everywhere, and there's just a whole bunch of stuff going on. And it's a time when stress just kind of gets turned on in our life all of a sudden. All of a sudden we're in lockdown and we can't go anywhere and we can't exercise, and just the news and the media and all this stuff just kind of comes up, and it's difficult to manage sometimes, right? And
yep.
We talk about, you and I have spoken about stress a bit, and I'd love to learn a little bit more about what's actually happening in the brain when these stress responses come up, and how does that actually start to impact us physically and emotionally?
Yeah, look, it's a great question, especially considering the times that we're in. I mean, look, human beings have always been exposed to stress since time immemorial. Stress, so I probably didn't call it stress, it's stimuli, information. So everything around us is just raw information, which to the nervous system, the nervous system decodes this information electrically in the form of signals. And so signals can be either high or low, and they can be perceived as either threatening or non-threatening. And that's really what it comes down to. So a lot of people think of stress, and when you say, are you stressed? And they say, oh, no, I'm not. Everything's great. Oh, I'm feeling really good. Life's great. But underneath the surface, how do they know that they're not physiologically stressed? So physiologically stressed, we would generally associate more towards the fight-flight mechanism, which most people have heard of these days. So in our bodies, we have an autonomic, which is a subconscious nervous system, the autonomic nervous system. And it has two major branches. That's the sympathetic, which is the fight-flight, and then it has the parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest. It is a little bit more complex than that, which we'll go over as well, where there's actually two different branches of the parasympathetic side. But generally, where the nervous system is decoding the raw information around you and inside you as well, and determining, usually based off past experiences, whether that stimuli is a threat to your survival or not. And if it determines that it's a threat to your survival, it will switch you either into a fight or flee, or it may even immobilize you as well. It may even immobilize you, shut you down. So all this is happening way before you're even consciously aware of it, because we think as humans that we are in much more control than we actually are, meaning that we're much more consciously in control of the physical happenings and the running of our body. We're not. The same systems that run our body, that run our heart rate, our breath rate, our digestion, all that sort of stuff, these are the same systems that are getting switched on and off in response to perception of raw information around us as a threat to our being. So it's really key, and it explains a lot of the reasons why people respond to stress in different ways, and there are so many factors that feed into that. But definitely your previous experience and exposure to stress, and the level of robustness of your nervous system to withstand stress will determine how you respond to it.
And so is it the amygdala that's remembering those previous experiences to certain stresses and how you responded to it, or is it other parts of the brain?
So the amygdala is like the switch. So the amygdala will either switch you into this defensive, reactionary, it's a threat mode, or it will not. Okay, so it is referencing a lot of past experience. So it's actually quite a bit more complicated neurologically than that. So you have the cerebellum that's involved in the motor action, so the way you responded to previous stresses. That then communicates with the basal ganglia, which then has your stored motor programs in response to any stimuli, whether that's walking or running or fleeing. Those three are working together. Then you have the posterior parietal cortex, which is more the association cortex. So that's the area that goes, well, it happened at this stage. And it's more references sort of like your physical state rather than like what's actually happening out there. So it's more like this type of a sensation, whether it was, say it was a loud sound, right? Well, what the last time you heard that level of sound at that decibel, what was it? Was it a lion? Okay, if it was a lion, then your amygdala is going to be quite sensitized to thinking that any sound that comes within that decibel range is going to be a lion. So it's going to, with its beautiful intelligence, switch on, and that switches on the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which starts a flood of hormones that get you starting to run away. Or if it's sufficient enough, you may just drop down in that spot and just be immobilized, which is again a survival strategy itself. Because generally, if it is a lion, let's just use the lion analogy again. A lion doesn't really like limp prey. So if there is a lion coming towards you, and you drop and you immobilize, it's going to come up. And everyone's seen a cat. They have a mouse, and once it becomes limp, they sort of throw away and get disinterested. Same thing. So it's actually, and that oftentimes the mouse is employing the same strategy. So essentially what happens is you go limp or you just run away. Okay. So sound is a big one. So it can be coming from, that's just using like a really dramatic scenario, but it could be just someone yelling at you. It could be your parents. You might have had, an angry father or something like that was always yelling at you, being aggressive. And so that has sensitized your amygdala to be hyper reactive with all these other parts of the brain and the neurology. So a smaller input which seems just similar to that, or is going to be like that, or you may be picking up also social cues from people, then you're going to start this physiological cascade of response to stress. So you're already stressed before you even know why you're stressed, which is where, anxiety comes in, because then you start to think about, well, hang on, you're cognitively trying to think, why am I actually stressed? Like, there's nothing actually going on. Or maybe there is, or maybe you're trying to associate everything. Well, it's because that person didn't respond to me in the way that I want. But really, your underlying physiology is just threatened. And this underlying physiology is often, it's developed and sensitized at a pre-verbal age.
Yeah, my brain immediately goes to like how do we, as parents, how do we consciously kind of do what we need to do so these things don't get programmed in at that early stage of life, or is it we don't even get a choice because it happens so quickly? There's a loud bang and then the kid gets scared, but it was just the door slamming. But then is it about how we react to that as parents to help the program?
Absolutely. Yeah. So you can't help these things. Life happens. So you want a robust child. If you have a robust child, they have a robust nervous system. If you have a robust nervous system, these threat systems aren't on the alert so much. So that can be developed at a young age. So kids are going to hit their head. They're going to have things happen that scare them. For instance, if I raise my voice to my little one, it's quite scary for her. And what I have to do afterwards is hold space with her and just get that connection back with her, eye to eye, face to face. Explore how she's feeling about it. Let her say what she needs to say. And then you kind of close the circuit off. But if there's, and it doesn't mean that there isn't any trauma from that, but like, because you just don't know how people are responding or little ones are responding. But the way they process it is quite differently. So there's closure there. And that closure creates like what's called a secure attachment.
Yeah, I like that. First of all, I would be scared if you were yelling at me. That would be a scary experience. Secondly, it makes me think maybe we can talk a bit about like the Hans Selye's like 3 stages of stress and how that works, because what you were just alluding to me is like there's that, well, you could probably talk more to it, but there's that first stage and if we don't deal with the trauma properly and close it off, like you said, that's when it kind of sets in and becomes chronic over time.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, talking about Hans Selye, he talks about the 3 stages of stress. So we have an alarm. So that could be just the exposure to that threatening stimuli, which is perceived as a stress. So a lion roaring, chasing after you, your dad yelling, or whatever it is, your boss yelling at you, being dumped, right? Whatever it is, it's an alarm, or being in a car accident, it's an alarm. Yep. So then because the amygdala is turned on, and then you've started that hormonal cascade. So you do that to deal with this threat. So you either gone into your sort of default programming. So you've gone aggressive, or you've run away, or you've immobilized, and then you need to now come back towards homeostasis. So we move into this stage 2, which is like a false homeostasis. It's not really the same homeostasis you had before that particular alarm. So then you're in a state of compensation. That's fine. The human body is a master compensator. Pretty much everyone lives in stage 2 because we've all been exposed to stressors. But what happens when you start to accumulate more alarms and you gain more compensation? So more stressors, more exposure, whether they're micro or macro. Obviously, big ones have a longer echo through the nervous system. But if you have, often I find this a lot in clinic, people who've had lots of trauma accumulate more trauma. They just tend to attract it. And that's where we can go a bit more into quantum mechanics and the human biofield and all that sort of stuff. But staying on track here, you accumulate more micro traumas, and then you get more compensation, and you will compensate for around 20 years or so until eventually your nervous system just goes, look, I can't hold this down anymore. Like you're not changing your behavior. You're not dealing with that stuff. When that person yelled at me, that really hurt me, and I need to let that go. So if you just sort of push things down, it still is sort of circulating through your nervous system as an electrical signal, but it's like pushing you out of this balanced state. So you can still remain balanced on the outside, but on the inside, you're not. And then eventually you'll end up with some sort of chronic condition, stress-based condition, whether it's digestive dysfunction. So digestive dysfunction is a big one. So neurologically, what's happening with digestive dysfunction is often people give themselves digestive issues, gut pains and IBS and leaky gut, all that sort of stuff, yeah, because they have unprocessed mental trauma. So the way the nervous system works is we work in primaries and secondaries. So we always have a primary dysfunction and a secondary dysfunction, and all of us have lots of them, okay? But some of them you just won't see because we're in that stage 2 compensation. We can remain pretty balanced, and they'll only start popping up when we start moving in more exhaustion phase.
What's primary and secondary dysfunction like? What is the differentiation?
Okay, this is moving into real functional neurology sort of stuff. So you will always everything the nervous system does is normal. Like there is no real dysfunctions. There's just compensations, right? So. For instance, let me think of a good example here. So so we'll use a gut example again. So there is a pathway between the gut and the brain through the vagus nerve. Now, if we've experienced a trauma that is too stressful for us to actually deal with, it's locked away in the subconscious circuits, which is the sort of The amygdala is hypersensitive to it, but it's not really expressing all the time. So it's actually safer. So what the nervous system does is it creates a buffer, which is called a secondary, which takes the load. And so the human nervous system will always prefer to stimulate the secondary rather than the primary, because the primary will actually bring you out of balance. The stimulating the secondary, this is pretty interesting stuff, will keep you in balance.
Okay.
Right? So they'll stimulate the secondary, give themselves gut issues in order to not deal with, and I'm pointing to the mind, I'm pointing to the head. I'm not saying all emotions live in the head, but it's like a limbic dysfunction. It's like a limbic, maybe it's a memory, maybe it's a series of memories, traumatic event. They're not dealing with it, so they'll give themselves some other physiological dysfunction to take the load.
Oh, wow.
Okay, and I'll give you an example of how this would look in structure. So if I'm watching someone move, because remember, the way the nervous system controls structure, and I'll let you cut. Is there anything you wanted to say there with that? Yeah. The nervous system controls your structure and your posture. So if someone has, say, like they've got lower back pain and it's on their right-hand side, right? So the primary dysfunction might be on the right-hand side, and so they'll make a secondary over here. So they'll often lean to that side because they don't want to go over here. Because if they stimulate it, they'll create some weakness or some more dysfunction. So they'll stimulate the secondary. So if you really know how to look at someone's posture, you'll see where they don't want to go and where they want to go, and where they don't want to go is where they're vulnerable, and where they're vulnerable is essentially keeping them feeling less robust. So what I do as a functional neurology practitioner, whether I'm working with the mind or the body, we dialogue with the nervous system and ask it where these primary dysfunctions are, and ask permission if we can, recalibrate it. And that's what we're doing. We're just recalibrating. We're just telling the brain, okay, here's problem A, here's problem B. You fire a reflex, which is like a reset button. And then the brain goes, cool, I understand that now. Boom, return to homeostasis. And it happens like that, straight away. And so it always does. But whether that impacts your symptomology, because symptomology is different to functionality. So, because often we have a symptom, we might have one symptom that has many of these neurological imbalances feeding into it. Well, they could be physical, structural. They could be, digestive. They could be emotional as well, even energetic. So we all have this. I've seen it many times. And just because you are symptom-free doesn't mean you don't have these dysfunctions. There's nothing wrong with them. There's nothing wrong with you. It's normal. There's nothing wrong with it, because the system is perfectly built to withstand stress. However, we live in a society that does not stop. So how the hell is the nervous system going to return itself to homeostasis? Sleep. So don't even come and see someone like me. Just bloody sleep. Sleep, rest, lounge around, put your feet on the earth, get some sunlight in your eyes, work way less, 4 hours a day, We've got everything we need to be able to return to homeostasis. And here's what happens with those dysfunctions. So you might have, say, the average person would probably have, say, thousands. There's nothing wrong with that. Don't freak out. Nothing wrong with that. They won't all be expressing. They can't all be expressing, or you wouldn't be able to function. But just say you have like a few hundred major ones and they're giving you all sorts of symptoms. You can just get your life back into balance, where you're sleeping 8 hours a night, you're meditating, you're doing whatever sort of things to down-regulate, get it into this parasympathetic, less reactionary state, eating good foods, you're doing some fasting or whatever it is, anything that the combination of good things that keeps you in balance. And a lot of those dysfunctions, well, they won't totally disappear, but the volume on them will go way, 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 way down. So they will not need to express. The only reason they will need to express is if you have started to not listen to your body, listen to the signals of the body, like I'm tired, I shouldn't be doing this, but you're getting external pressure from your boss or whoever it is, you got to do it. You got to meet those targets, okay? Which is forcing, you're fighting nature. You are nature. So listen to the signals. But if you're in your head a lot, which is, we've been programmed as a society to not believe our own body. It's always giving us signals. If we don't listen to those signals, what will happen? You'll get the symptoms, and these dysfunctions will arise up. Right?
Oh man, that's fascinating and just on point, and I had the last 4 weeks off, right? And I did a 3-week fast on water, and then I had a week of refeeding and whatnot. And, I was saying to a few people, I had 3 weeks off. And they say, what do you do? Well, we kind of laid there and we had our eyes closed for, I don't know, including sleeping, probably 16 hours a day, because the rest of the time during the day we're lying there, eyes closed, and we're sipping water and we're reading some books and we're relaxing, and I'm looking at the same palm trees for 3 weeks in a row, and I'm getting some sunshine, and I'm going out and I'm walking barefoot on the grass, right? Doing our things. And, when you really think about it in today's world, that when I explain that to people, to a lot of people, they say that, Alex, that's crazy. Like you're out there, mate. I don't know how you do that and then still run a business and do all your things, but you're out there. However, I challenge that and I say, well, like really? Because the pace of life now is so insane. It is so far away from nature, like you said, and we are nature. And the most challenging part of a fast is actually for me, the first 5-6 days, because you slow down. You're not looking at phones, you're not working, you're not doing anything. Everything just kind of slows down. Time starts to move a bit kind of faster, and you're in flow with everything a little bit more. And you slowly come back to the pace of the body, and you realize how far away from that pace you were, right?
Yeah.
So what I say to people is it was 3 weeks of rest, but I mean, really, it's nothing, because the rest of the year, it's just this high pace of life that is 2021. And, it's no wonder that everyone has these things breaking down in their bodies, and that all of these stage 1, stage 2, different compensations and things are coming up and resulting in these symptoms, because going all the time, and the body's just never getting a chance to fall into that homeostasis. And I love what you said too around you just sleep and eat and move a bit more and get some light in your eyes, get some tryptophan building up in the back of the red, do these things and just find more of that balance. And that's how we can start to just wind the volume down.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you touched on some fascinating things there that I just want to see if I can remember them all and get into some of it. One thing that was coming up was about there's these just this long list of emotional traumas, and then oftentimes we suppress those. Oftentimes, 99% of the time, we suppress those, and then they can manifest. For me, they manifested in gut issues, right?
Yeah.
And they can manifest in other things. So is the brain seeing emotional and physical trauma as the same thing, or is it kind of one after the other? How does that kind of work?
It's the same thing. I mean, the limbic system, the limbic, so you're saying emotional and physical trauma, yeah? So limbic system is involved not just in, limbic system is the emotional processing system, right? So people always associate it with emotions. However, the amygdala is involved in every single movement that you take, every single one, all right? So not just emotions, because it has to associate whether any movement has a threatening stimuli. Can you do that movement, basically? So which is why you see people who are in physical pain, they sort of move really slowly and rigidly because they're under threat. And so their limbic system is hyperactive. But yes, if you visualize something, in your own mind, the neurology then sends a motor command even through the nerve impulses into the same muscles that would need to be activated in order to act out what you're imagining.
Is that why sometimes you flinch when you're sleeping? Like you're having a dream and like I was skating and then like my foot kicked.
Yeah. I had one like a few months ago and I was like, I just literally like, missed a step. I was in a dream and I like missed a step and I was like, oh, I like woke right up. It's random.
What's going on?
I don't know. Huh?
So is that what's going on? Like the brain is kind of like, oh, I'm doing that. So it's activating that.
Yeah. Look, it must have been sufficient enough to be able to bleed into your conscious, because usually there's like a gating thing in dreaming where parts of the central nervous system sort of shuts off the feeding into the to the peripheral muscles, but must just bleed in. But even if you're just visualizing something, that's why people, when they anxiety creates physiological fatigue. If you're thinking a lot, your muscles and joint and glands and organs and everything will act according to what you're thinking about. So you've got constant hormonal fluxing going on, and the blood sugar, changing up and down as well. Because obviously, more threatening a stimuli is the more sympathetic fight flight you have to be in, which throws your whole blood sugar system out of balance. And blood sugar has been linked to like many conditions.
Yeah, it's all connected, right?
Yeah.
Sleep, everything like that.
Well, migraines, for instance, is like blood sugar and hormones. But then what's creating that? Like, we know it's a blood sugar and hormone thing, but what's the trigger? Is it a physical trigger or is it emotional? And really, what's the difference? There is no difference. There's always an emotional and a physical component to everything that you do. However, I'm very lucky in what I do using kinesiology, functional kinesiology or functional neurology. We can ask the nervous system, okay, out of all these dysfunctions, where do we start? Where do we go in? Like, how do you go in? How do you go into the system? That's the hardest part being a practitioner is, where do you start? Where do you go in? Turns out the body is always telling you exactly what's at the top of what is the most thing, the number one thing that's out of balance, or the number one things, right? For instance, the cranium, the skull, has certain areas on it which will be tight and restricted depending on the type of system and organ, which is amazing. I sort of always knew this as well. You've also got Chinese medicine.
So can you feel that on someone's head? 100%.
Wow. So, for instance, like in this temporoparietal suture right here, which is on the side of the head, a lot of people get headaches and stuff there. But in some of the training I've done in fascial counterstrain, which is manual therapy, really, the guy who invented it, he figured out that if there's tension here, it's actually indicative of a lymphatic blockage on the same side of the body. Right? So I'll often do that with people, because people always have so much going on, but they've got to find an in, and it depends on the condition. So if they've got like fatigue or brain fog or something like that, we're looking, maybe it's lymphatic, and I'll push in here and they'll be like, ow, right? And I can feel the restriction. And I'm deliberately pushing in hard because I want to see if they go, ow, right? I'm not trying to inflict pain, but if there's nothing going on, they'll just go, yeah, no, there's nothing there. So then what will happen is I'll go down into the body and then I'll prod through the lymphatic nodes, and sure enough, one of them will be painful, and I'll literally, like one behind the knee, I'll release that, come back up here, and it's gone. I have no more sensation here. Then we'll feel around the other areas, and then now they've got something going on behind the mastoid, and that's indicative of organ dysfunction on the same side as well. So then we'll just treat that, because it's like you've gone, okay, number one, get that, cool. Let's bring up the next most important thing. So that's one way to work physiologically. And with the emotions, if someone, you can tell if someone has emotional stuff anyway, but we've got certain indicator points that we can use. We can just put someone's hand on their head, and if that turns a weak muscle strong or a strong muscle weak, then we know that there's some emotional stuff that needs to be cleared, and we can clear it out of the nervous system sometimes in as quickly as 30 seconds. Well, what I mean by clearing it is that you enable the nervous system to integrate it, that thing. And people always have this sort of physical response. So that's when you know that you've cleared this thing, because this cleared it or integrated the emotion. And therefore you've then taken a whole heap of stage 2 compensation out of the way. And now they can return closer to a balanced homeostatic state.
So,
sorry, mate.
No, it's just, it's fascinating to me. The thing that gets me though is, and this is probably my programming, like it almost sounds too good to be true to be able to say like, oh, we've just cleared that thing, which might have been hindering this person for a decade, you know, in like 30 seconds. Is that because to the brain, like it's just like you can just kind of do the work? Like it sounds like there's like a switch almost to just clear some of this stuff. Is that always? There is. Like,
it is always the case in terms of clearing that individual dysfunction. Yes, yeah. But sometimes when I'm doing clearance, sometimes people take 7-10 minutes. Some people are not ready yet. So it's always individualized. But if they're ready, it's the right time, and it can be 30 seconds. But, you know, does that mean that person will feel instantly better? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Because, again, like I say, this is just functions or compensations that we're clearing here. But if someone has many, many compensations feeding into this one symptom or often a bunch, then you're going to have to clear quite a few of these. And then there's going to be also integration time of the nervous system. So everyone integrates. That's why, like, some people, if I'm doing a session with someone, I often find, actually, especially if they've got a lot going on, they need like 2 to 4 weeks between sessions, because in that time they're actually balancing. Their nervous system is still calibrating from that session, you know, in 2 to 3 weeks later. And you can feel it. Having experienced that myself, being a client, I can feel it. It's like your system is like kind of, you know, you can sometimes feel it physically, you can sometimes feel it emotionally, and it's like it just knows what to do. And so what we're trying to do is we're just showing the nervous system where the problem is, and it's doing the rest. It knows exactly what to do. It knows a hell of a lot more than I ever would about. So your individual system knows everything it needs to do. But yeah, the question is, everyone always asks that, is this going to be straight away? Well, it can. But also it might not be. And also it might not be the exact therapy that you need right now. Like, everyone needs different things at different times. There's no one thing that does everything. I wish there was, but there's not.
Yeah, it feels like you ticking off a lot of boxes. It feels like coming to see you would tick off a lot of boxes at once. Let's talk about integration for a second, because I think that's a really interesting point. So let's say we do some work and you clear a bunch of things on someone. How, it takes some time for the body to integrate, change that. I get that. How like, what if they go back out and start putting new traumas in? You know, like, how do you prevent that? Like, how do you stop that from happening if you're going back into a really stressful environment and we are undoing a bunch of stuff, but then we're just putting a bunch more stresses in? How do you kind of handle that, and like, how does that then affect the integration?
It could affect it. It's a good question, but it's also not. Also, again, like, it's complex. So what I can do is try and find the highest level compensations and clear them. So you take the most amount of load off the system. So it becomes robust just from that process. However, they still, of course, need to change. If their lifestyle has got them into this position, if they don't change their lifestyle, they're going to accumulate more for sure. But we're always going to accumulate more. So it's like, how do you prevent that? Well, people have to. Number one thing I want to try and teach people, and this is what some of my upcoming training is going to be about, is being able to tune into themselves and realize get their own barometer. So because people just are not aware of how out of balance they are. And so if you start to tune in, which, as you know, I know you do this, it's a process that takes time. It's intuitive, and you get better at it as the more you do it. So every person needs to start to develop that, right? And so we then have various lifestyle practices, or I'll always give someone just the top 2 things that they need, and that's always individualized to them as well. So whether that's earthing or, we'll manage sleep, focus on sleep, whether it's a particular supplement or food or diet or whatever they need to do. If I clear as much stress as possible, much compensation as possible, get them back into balance, the system's going to balance themselves anyway. And in their own mind, they'll start to get a behavior change as well. We often don't get the credit for it, which is fine. Don't need to, but it just, because it happens so innately. But they do need to, especially if it's lifestyle issues that have got them into this into this state, they need to change that. But we can't do it all at once. I when I used to work as a Czech professional, and their programs are so extensive. It's so much to them, and they're all great, but not many people would do them because they're so extensive. So now it's just little bits, little change, one or two things every time, and just implement that and make sure it's those things that you're going to do, not because you feel like you have to. Because if you feel like you have to, you're not going to do it. But if it works for you, so there's a massive art in that as well, which is trying to manage that. And there's different personality types that respond differently as well. So, yeah, it's like letting go of control and then just working through the layers. But they have to be changing something each time. So you'll get one or two new things, whether that's a movement or sometimes I might even get people to read a book if they need a particular book which has a message in it that is something that they need to learn for themselves. It's all individualized. I can test up what they need, but because I've been doing this for a while now, I tend to have a pretty good hunch of what they need, based on experience and intuition and stuff like that. So, yeah, look, it has to be lifestyle. Lifestyle changes have to be implemented because what are all these conditions? A lot of them, the chronic ones, they're lifestyle driven. Yeah. So another answer to your question. So if there is an emotional thing, they might even have an affirmation that they need to do, which helps the clearing even more. Or they might have a breathing exercises, which helps them manage stress. Yeah. So it's, again, individualized.
Yeah. I love that. One thing I always say is that wherever we are at with our health, that is the expression of how we've been doing everything in our lifestyle up until that point. Right. So when we start to want to heal and we go and see someone like yourself, or we do a fast or reduce fast, we start to eat more cleanly or whatever it may be, we go and see a Reiki, whatever, then we start to do that work. We need to change the way that we're living, because otherwise we're just going to continue to get the same result.
100%. Yeah.
It's that last time we spoke about fundamentals. And that's fundamentals for a reason.
It's fundamentals, the fundamentals underpin all mastery and excellence in any field or, and life. I think people forget that they just living life is you can't just people are just running their programs. The programs of what you do this, you go to this school, you go to this job, you do this, you watch the footy, you have the beer, you go to the pub. It's just a program. Now, to live outside of that program and take responsibility for yourself, and once you're healthy, then not only to be healthy, you have to take responsibility for yourself. Now, once you're healthy, then you have a different mission, and that different mission is usually taking responsibility for the world around you. So we now know sometimes why some people keep themselves sick, keep themselves small. We need to get out of the programs.
Yeah, so let's unplug for. Oh,
sorry, it's a battery warning. 20%. Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, cool. Maybe we'll just go until you die, and then it'll be an abrupt ending. So let's. That's good timing. Let's unplug from the matrix a little bit. And at the start, we touched on bringing back our own personal power and really embodying our own personal power and remembering that we have a choice. Everything is a choice. Changing our lifestyle is a choice. Going to see Nick Moss is a choice. Implementing the things that we get told from someone like yourself is a choice. And now more than ever, I think we need to be reminded of that. You know, the way that we respond to our environment and things going on in our life, it's all a choice. And we need to take that responsibility back. Like I said, more than ever, now is the time to be reminding people of that. And I know you said that's been coming up in your clinic a lot, and I'm just curious to hear a little bit more about that.
100%. Like look, now more than ever, we look around the world, I think this is a very key issue, because what's happening all right now, whether you believe whatever you believe in, you're allowed to believe in whatever you want, that's fine. But you cannot deny that the world is under the thumb of, external authorities, right? How does that happen? If you're not governed, if you're not self-governed, you're going to allow someone else to govern things for you. And if you're self-governed, you know the difference between right and wrong. You can take responsibility for yourself. You know what is right and wrong. You're not going to cheat someone because you know that's wrong, right? It's really basic. It's the fundamentals, right? So how does this happen? Well, people have, and I'm not going to say it, there are elements that have deliberately brought people out of their power, their own individual power. But again, like you say, there is still a choice to that. So you can wake up at any time and you can decide to go down a different path, which is to start to make yourself more self-sufficient and govern yourself and take charge of your own health. So one of the key things as well, so if you can be doing all the right things for health, like all the stuff that we've been talking about, but if you don't have a compass, meaning that you don't know where you're going, then what's the point in doing it? I mean, of course there's a point in doing it, but that's only going to get you to a certain level, because if you're not living your own truth, if you're not aligned with your own purpose, which is completely unique to you, no, it's no one else, it's you. Just on that, I had one of the other kinesiology practitioners I work with, and she was surprised because she saw one of my clients come in, and this person had driven from 4 hours away to come and see me. And she was like, why did she drive 4 hours away? And she said, isn't there a local kinesiologist around that area? And I said, there might be, but she's not coming to see them. She's coming to see me, because what I offer, and this is not being arrogant. There's only one of me. So there's only one of me on this earth. So people are going to either resonate with me or they're not. And the people that resonate with me are going to come and see me from wherever they come. So it's about sitting in your own value. There's only one of you. So how do you find that purpose? So you could be doing all the right things, trying to be healthy, but you're not aligned with your purpose. And I do have a few clients like this, and we're trying to sort of narrow in is, where do we need to go? And people often think it's this external thing, like a job title or something. And it may be, but it's more about a feeling of you doing what feels innately right to you. And usually it involves it's usually some sort of service capacity, because I think we're all here to serve in some way, some form or another. And it's the things that it's the thing that you do without being paid for it, that you would do without being paid for it. You just do it because it's innately you. You know what I mean? And aligning ourselves with that should be actually probably the number one thing that we do first, because once we do that, then it's actually quite easy to maintain these health practices, because you cannot live your truth and your purpose and perform at a high level without having these basic fundamental health practices supporting you. I know this for sure with myself. If I did a bit of 15 minutes of Qigong before I got on this call, because I know it helps. And if I didn't, I'd still be able to do it, but it wouldn't be at the level that I'm doing it now, because I know it helps. If I go a few days without doing these things, my mind gets infected with the old stuff that used to stop it, to disempower. So we have to maintain this stuff. We have to maintain it. And it's much easier, as you would know, if you have your purpose, which is not some fixed thing. It's something that is evolving as you are all the time. It's always evolving with you, and you can go in any direction that you want. You can do whatever you want, as long as you don't harm others and you're trying to make the world a better place. I think we're all, this what's happening right now, to be told what to do, where to go, what to wear, like that's, it reminds me of, like my little one, like she doesn't understand the world. So she needs to She feels like she needs to, and we try to empower her as much as possible. She feels like she needs to ask us for permission to do this. Daddy, can I do that? Mummy, can I do this? And I feel like on some level, there's a lot of adults doing that right now. And it's all generations too. It's not just older people or just teenagers, although they're probably the most affected. But there's an element of like, just live your truth, regardless, do what is right. You know what I mean? Like it's just sort of, but that comes with a connection to yourself and being able to stand in your own sovereign self and live that truth and not be able to be knocked off your path.
Yeah, and connect.
That was
Hey,
that was a bit of a spiel there. Sorry. Did it answer what you asked?
Yeah, it did. You just need to hop down off your pedestal now, mate, and we'll just brush you off. And yeah, no, that's great. And I think it's a really important message right now. And I have a question. Do you think, however, that there's some people, really conscious of sounding judgy here, but everyone's on their own journey, Nick, right? So are there some people that they're just not destined to be to take their own responsibility fully and really, experience that kind of life? Do you think this
it has to be. It has to be, right? If you look around, there has to be. There has to be that. I think statistically, that's probably their journey. I'm not going to claim to know how or why that works. Is that a natural thing? You could argue that maybe we've been engineered into being that way by our society, whether it's deliberate or not. Society is structured in that way 100%. Our current society is structured to have a lot more people who are just going through the motions and just living like a kind of a pre-programmed life. And I feel this is the thing. If that person wants to do that, great, fine. If they're happy with that, fine. I'm not saying everyone has to live their truth or live their purpose. I just think it's a lot easier to implement these things. And I also have this belief that we all have a divine purpose. We all have a unique gift that we're here to share. Everyone does. I do believe that. I do truly believe that. But then what would happen if, what about all the people who do all those important jobs, or the cleaning jobs and, picking up rubbish and all that sort of stuff? Like, what would the world be like without them? So I don't know. It's a hard question to answer. So, yeah, look, I do feel like we need to, there's always this yin yang polarity balance in the universe. So in the world that we live in. So we do need to have the opposites to understand where we're at as well. Otherwise we don't have a reference point.
I love what you're saying. I've talked about purpose a lot on this podcast, and there's something on a cellular level that we can all connect with, that we know we need some sort of focus, some sort of driving force. And I think what I'm really getting from what you're saying is like what sits above all that. It's love, right? It's love, and it's being who we are and letting our light shine, right? Healing these traumas, doing this work, because no matter who we are, that light is within us, and it's just piled traumas on traumas on traumas on top of that. As we start to heal some of that, this light gets to shine brighter and brighter. And I always talk about why I love fasting so much, because you clear that stuff away, and then you find that white light is there, and you really realize we're all actually just encompassing in love. And when you're in that state, fear does not exist, right? You cannot be fearful and be loving at the same time. And when you're in that state of love and giving, that's when you're in your true power. And that's when you're truly present too. And that's when you're truly fucking living life, and making decisions from that point within us, which is just absolutely aligned with who we are as a person, our uniqueness, our beauty, our humility, our specialness. And when you act from that place, you know, you start to heal things. You start to deal with the trauma from when you got yelled at, you know, or when the door got slammed or whatever it is. And that's, at the moment, there's this big division. Now I'm just commentating, but there's this big division in the world of love and fear and right and wrong, and get the vaccine or don't get the vaccine, or I believe this or I believe that. And it's really been driven into us at the moment. And it's a real challenge. And that's why I love your message. It's such a time to remind ourselves that we can take responsibility for our life. We always have a choice to do that. We can
always.
And to the point of, you know, even when things happen to us that, you know, really you could easily say had nothing to do with us, we can still take responsibility for those moments and say, what could I have done differently? How could I have, you know, treated the situation differently? How could I react to that situation differently? Because we can't, there's so much we can't control, but we can control how we react to what happens to us in this life. And it's a time to really remind ourselves of our power and who we are. And that's why I'm a big fan of contemplation too, and just sitting, and why I love fasting, because you're forced to sit and do nothing and just remind yourself of, like, who am I? What am I doing here? You know, what do I want to be doing? What do I want to be feeling? Especially like for the feminine, like, how do I want to be loved? How do I love myself? How do I continually remind myself of that? Having that time and that silence, although it's so foreign to so many people, it's really critical to coming back to what you were saying, to remind ourselves of that inner power that perhaps some of us are losing at the moment. Yeah,
100%. I mean, that was great words you said there, mate. It's really good. I remember I had a similar experience. Like, I'd like to do a fast like you do one day. Eventually, I'm definitely going to do it. But you'll have to help me out with that. But I remember having a similar experience on, like, Vipassana meditation, which is a 10-day, most people heard this 10-day meditation, silent meditation. People go, oh, it's hard not to speak. That's the easiest part. It's being with yourself. You don't have a phone. You don't have access to anything. You have 2 meals a day. It's just you and your thoughts, and you're just sitting and you're meditating 10 hours a day, sometimes more. And it's full on. It's so full on, but it's amazing as well. And it's just like a clearing away all this sort of stuff. And in itself, it's a slower and more painful way of doing what I do. And definitely a very self-empowering way of doing that, because you're doing it yourself. You're just sitting with yourself and learning how to remain equanimous with the experience around you. And as that is happening, then things are just dropping away. But then there's also stuff that's coming up for you to look at and then observe and just let it pass through. Like, some funny things happen on that, actually. Like, I remember it was my first one, and you know, your narrator voice, like your kind of how you think, right? Like the voice that you're thinking. Mine turned out to be, at some stage after I cleared through a bunch of layers on day 3 or 4, it's like a Northern English type accent. And I was like, it was bizarre. And so maybe there's some lineage there. I don't know what that was about. I thought it was quite funny. I was having a little laugh to myself.
That's hilarious.
But I remember the first one, I finished at that, and it came out. My mind felt so switched on, so integrated. And I'd pick a book up and I'd look at that book, and literally the words, it felt like they were flying into my brain, because I just created a lot more space, like you said. So much space. It's going back into this yin state, just getting out of the way of all the noise. There's so much noise. So how can you connect with that? And that's what I'm saying, is where society has engineered us into this state. The iPhone, which is a great invention, by the way, but you got to be able to, that's the 10% thing. It's a great invention, but you got to know how to use something with that much power, you know? Look.
That's actually a really valid point. You know, they are so powerful, and we're not taught how to harness it properly. You know, one thing I started doing after this fast as well, is when I'm thinking about things, I'll do that when I'm on my phone. I'll do that when I'm on my phone. So now I'm trying to get in the habit of, when I go on my phone, making a list of what I need to do. Like the first thing I go into my notes, what do I actually need to do on my phone right now? And then just doing those things and then putting it down, right?
That's
just
really good.
using it as a tool, right? Because that's what it is. That's what they could be, right? Tool to do incredible things. Okay, I need to do some internet banking. I want to search that thing on Instagram, embarrassingly. I want to do this. I have to read that email. Cool. All right, I've got a list. I have to text mum or whatever. And then just doing that and then putting it down and not getting sucked into the notifications here or the red dots there and all that stuff.
Like that takes a certain level of discipline, but it brings us back to the thing about choice, is that, look, you could, just look at your phone and watch movies for the rest of your life, but it's not going to be the best use of your time. Like you say, you can choose what to do with it, and each choice has a different, it impacts your life differently. So people can choose to suffer. Well, no, here's the thing. We bring in neurology. They might not be able to choose not to suffer at that point, because then we have to do some work, whether it's meditation retreats, fasting, coming to see me for a few sessions, learning to meditate, getting those limbic amygdaloid circuits to stop telling you that you're under threat. And then we can, from that point onwards, start to make better choices. So that is a key point where people are in this victim mode. So I empathize with them a lot. Not victim, they're suffering and they're in fear. So I don't look down on any individual that has that, because they're actually not under their own, they're not really under their own control to a certain extent. So this is where the choice thing becomes a little bit of an interesting one. So if someone comes in and they're really stressed and traumatized, I'm not going to say you need to do this, that, and the other. I might need to spend a few sessions just literally down-regulating the nervous system. Sometimes it can take 5 to 10 sessions of just that. Not even saying much to them, just sort of flicking switches in their nervous system and just getting them into this balance. And then all of a sudden they're starting to be able to sit in themselves a bit more, and they're able to make to think about the situation and what's happening, and then make better choices, or more life affirmative choices for themselves. So yeah, it's complex. The world is in trauma. It always has been. There's been lots of wars. As that book, It Didn't Start With You, says, we're loaded up with traumas even before we start our life. We have traumas in our genes, and some, we still need to clear some of that stuff. And this is where, generational psychotherapy work is really good too. So I've had to work through stuff from my family, and there's still stuff that comes up with that. And, my partner does as well. And we try, and if we can, and you can't always do it, because sometimes you get stuck in your own patterns that aren't even yours, that you've just modeled off the people around you. And it's not their fault. You're just modeling, because that's what the nervous system does. It models whoever's around them to keep them safe. And then, so it's a process. But I feel like we're in a very interesting time in history where there is a bit of a divide going on, and it's a big exercise in letting go, I think. If someone wants to do that, then that's their choice. That is fine. That is fine. And we have to sort of love them and leave them, not leave them, but let them do what they need to do. So you still do that in love. And it's very hard sometimes, but it's a fact of, it's probably always been around, but it's very magnified right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm conscious that your battery is draining by the second. Let's, if you could just talk a little bit more about where people can find you, how they can work with you, and some things you're working on. And then if we still have some battery left, I'll ask you a question and we'll wrap up.
No worries, mate. Yeah, so I use Instagram as my primary sort of communication channel. I do have like a Facebook page that's linked with it as well. And then a slowly building YouTube channel. But my business name is Functional Neurohealth. And that's my handle on handle is Functional Neurohealth. I post as much as I can there. There's a combination of videos, lots of posts. I've got a link tree there which has links to a lot of the other videos I have. Some are free. I have done some webinars as well, which are going to be on my back end of my site. So when that's all up, that'll be all on the link tree there. Planning to do some education later in the year on sort of this mind-body mastery. So looking more into this, how our psychology fits into our physiology, some common patterns, and then how to start clearing through that yourself, and then aligning more towards your ideal, your highest expression. Because I just think right now in the world, it's very critical, because it will allow us to feel not so threatened and to be able to navigate what none of us really know is coming ahead. So, because I feel like if you, like you said, if you're in yourself and you're balanced as much as you can be, then not knowing is actually part of the fun. Right?
Yeah.
I don't like knowing exactly what's going on. It's more fun. It's a bit of a roller coaster. How are you going to adapt? What are you going to do? Then you have to use all your resources. So that's why I sort of wanted to go into that area. And the stuff I used to teach as well. But yeah, that's the main way to contact me. You can message me through the app or whatever. And then I have a website, Functional Neurohealth, as well. And there's messaging functions on that website as well. But that's all going to be revamped before September, October. So.
Yeah, beautiful. Awesome. Yeah, I love that. You also just touched on the roller coaster there, and it's like everything that happens in life is a gift, right? And so being resourceful and appreciating the moments, whether they're hard or great. Love that. You touched on that you've done a couple Vipassana retreats. How did they go, and did anything kind of crazy happen other than realizing you've got some like weird in your brain?
Yeah, well, in the first one, I've done 3. On the first one, and the second one was really hard. The third one was better, but the first one was really hard, but it was actually, I felt amazing afterwards. That's the thing about them. You think you get better at doing the actual meditation, but the experience itself is different each time. The first one, I remember there's about 4 days in, you've got to sit for basically 2 hours. And me being a perfectionist, ex-soldier, all that sort of stuff, I always try to do things, as pure as I'm a purist, right? So, and it's not always the best thing, but we're sitting for 2 hours basically, and I was literally in my own mind, like my legs were dying. I was in so much pain, and I still hadn't got the concept of what it was, and we had to basically learn this style of meditation. There's like 200 people in this room, big meditation hall, and I was like in so much pain. And I remembered an experience I had years ago where I just let go. And when I let go, I became nothingness. And, I had this sort of, what do you call a nirvana or samadhi sensation. And in this moment, I was in so much pain. And I just remember it was like anger, like, I'm in so much pain. And then I was just like, in my mind, just went, fuck it. And sorry, excuse the language. And I just let go. And as that happened, I literally felt all the molecules in my body just turn, like just go into vibration. And I was sitting in a room full of 200 people, and I couldn't feel myself. And I knew I was there, but I was part of. It's just that you can't really describe it, but to describe it would not really describe it. But I just felt connected, and then we had to speak, and I remember he was like, okay, so we've got to say something. He's like, no, now you need to ask me to do this. And I was like, how am I going to speak? I don't even know where my mouth is. And then, it was like, and then I remember I spoke, because there was no division. Yeah. It was just vibration. And then so I spoke, and as soon as I spoke, I started to come back into the body, and it was like, oh, the pain came back. I was like, so much pain. And then but because I'd had that experience, and this is a very key point, I hope it doesn't cut out now. Mm-hmm. Because I'd had such an amazing experience, I then craved it for 2 days afterwards. Because I was craving it, those 2 days afterwards were sheer pain.
Yeah.
And I went to the teacher, I said, this happened, and I feel sore. And he just said really sort of with a lot of wisdom, he's like, yeah, you're craving that experience. Release attachment. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And so then it took me another few days of just being able to be equanimous with pain and pleasure and not getting attached to either. And it was amazing. And then the last few days were just like complete present with the moment. There was no association. This is good. This is bad. It just is. It's just sensation, raw information, like we talked about at the beginning. It's just raw information. You can decide how you react to that raw information if you train your mind enough, and you get into that state. So then by the end of it, we're just buzzing, and when we finish, we're all talking. We haven't talked for 10 days, and we're just talking about all this amazing stuff. And then you go out in the outside world, and because you've got such a glow, people are just attracted to you. And then you've got to do the work and maintain that, which, I did for a long time. And I do different style of meditation now, and it has a similar effect. But really interesting experience.
That sounds amazing. Yeah. That's just beautiful. And I love the wisdom coming from the teacher, just like, it's all good.
Just so relaxed. Release attachment. Look at, yep, you're right. Yeah. I just suffered for 2 days.
Yeah. 2 words was all you had. Mate, Nick, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. We covered a lot. You're an absolute wealth of knowledge. I'm so grateful for your time. I know you're super busy at the moment, so thank you so much.
Thanks, mate.
I really appreciate it, and looking forward to hopefully having you on again soon.
Yeah, thanks, mate, and thanks, and good words that you contribute as well. It's really nice to hear that. So you're doing amazing stuff, mate. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. I appreciate it.